On behalf of New England Antique Racers, welcome to the 14th Annual New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame induction ceremony. A warm reception to this year's inductees, friends, family, and race fans amongst the crowd. If you're visiting us from Florida, you can put down your sunscreen for a minute. For the rest of us, get ready to pick up your shovel again. On behalf of Bob Seller, President of New England Antique Racers, and Bruce Cohen, the Chairman of the Hall of Fame, we welcome you all. The first order of business is words from our President, Mr. Bob Seller.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. You can see I have some problems, but I'm doing okay. I know this is the Hall of Fame meeting and banquet, but I gotta say something about NEAR before we start. I gotta say that we've got to go on. We're the only blessed club that does things like what we're doing tonight. Honors those from the past, those that built the sport, and we gotta help them keep it going. Today's event is the most important thing that we do to keep the memory of the old timers alive. Every year, those selected openly show their joy at being here. And NEAR is the only one that's doing it, and we've got to continue it. Personally, as president of NEAR, I am extremely proud to have been elected, particularly in my current condition. Medically, I'm doing fine. I had my hood on this morning for the first time. And I am improving in all ways. I also want to say one more thing about NEAR. We have here something around 405 people. We have a membership in NEAR of about 300. There must be a lot of people here who are not members of NEAR. We could definitely use your help, your presence, and of course your finances. But I would like to see, I'm sure that at the table out in the hallway, they have membership forms. If they don't have them, we'll find a way to get you registered anyway. And I hope we can keep going this way. Good luck to all these inductees. I hope they have one heck of a time tonight. They deserve it, and they're the ones that get it this year. We'll have more next year. Thank you.
It's been a tradition in these Hall of Fame banquets to have the past Hall of Fame inductees stand and be recognized. So at this time, would all the past inductees, Hall of Famers, please rise and be noticed. And folks, before we get started in today's ceremony, I want to take time, a moment of silence, to remember the Hall of Famers that have passed, and for Hall of Famers who could not attend because being stricken by illness. And also, please say a special prayer to one of our very special friends, Jolie, who was stricken last night with an illness. We all pray for Cho, a speedy recovery. And we also remember the Hall of Famers. So at this time, ladies and gentlemen, please, a moment of silence. Thank you. The first order of business is the Jack Ratta Memorial Award. And here to present that award is one of the New England's finest historians, a great guy, and part of the Pronine Museum in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, Mr. R.A. Sylvia.
Thank you, Peter, for calling me. 14 years, who would have believed it? And I can only echo Bob Seller's remarks about the club. This, specifically this Hall of Fame, is known nationally and has a great reputation. The first award today is the Jack Ratta Memorial Award. Jack Ratta was one of the first media guys from mainstream Manchester, New Hampshire newspaper that gave fair shake to racing. And he did it for a good many years until his passing. Just looking at the list of previous winners of this award shows that there are plenty of people in the New England region that carry on that tradition. One of those gentlemen is going to be awarded tonight. He knew Jack quite well in the early days when he was up north. It's reported that he and Jack did share a few beverages on occasion. Bill Balser is the gentleman's name. He's been involved around here from the 1950s, and he's still involved when he can get out at mostly the southeastern New England tracks. And this will be his second major award. It's a little-known secret that back in the 80s, when he was in the middle of running up and down the East Coast with his beloved LTDs, he got an award from OPEC for his undying support. He was born in Brockton, Mass., grew up in that area, went down south for his formal schooling, returned to the Northeast, took up photography, ended up at a racetrack, Norwood, nearby. And by the time he was done, he was the track photographer at any track of note in southeastern New England. Brookline, New Hampshire, Westboro, Thompson, Norwood, Seekonk. He was everywhere. Oxford Plains for all their opens, Martinsville for the modified shows. He finished out his career alongside his son David, was by now under Bill's wing and carrying on the family tradition, and with the blessing of their Phil's lovely wife, Phyllis, and carried on to this day. As I've used this before, as many people had, but they say Confucius, or one of those guys, said a picture's worth 1,000 words. And people like Bill Balser are surely worth that to people like myself that document and do some writing involving auto racing. So with that, we'd like to wake up Bill Balser and bring him up here as this year's, that was a Freudian slip, this year's recipient of the Jack Ratter Award. Come on up, Bill.
Not much to say, but just thank you very much, everybody.
The first three inductees that will be going in today will be inducted and presented by Mr. R.A. Sylvia and Mr. Dave Dykes, this year, 2010's Charlie Stibbins Award winner for New England Antique Racers. Here to present the first three inductees, Dave Dykes, Mr. R.A. Sylvia.
Hi folks, first of all I'd like to welcome you. Our first inductee in the Veterans Committee is going to be Dan Galullo, multi-time Riverside Park champion. He was a premier player within the Tattersall Family's United Stock Car Racing Club, once the sanctioning body in New England. Among his many accomplishments was scoring the 1962 United Grand Championship, a feat accomplished by winning at many of the United sanctioned tracks in the Northeast during a period in which the competition was particularly fierce. Galullo scored an incredible amount of victories at tracks such as Plainville, Waterford, West Haven, Cherry Park, Malta, Springfield, and of course Riverside. It's just a tremendously long list. He also competed on the NASCAR Grand National Circuit, recording a fine finish at Old Bridge Stadium in 1956. Following a serious heart attack while still very much in his prime, he was forced to retire from the sport. Sadly, we lost Dan in 1974. Today, we welcome the late Dan Galullo into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame.
I'd like to thank everybody for voting my father into this Hall of Fame. I know he would be real proud, and I'm real proud to accept the award for him. Thank you.
I'm back. Our second inductee from the Veterans Committee is another gentleman from Massachusetts, Louis DeMaury from Devon. When I was quite young, which was quite a while ago, I used to buy all the trade papers, Illustrated and National, still have them, and read through there and I kept seeing this name as this gentleman's cars, winning sprint car races, not only throughout New England, but all through the northeastern seaboard. And I said, wow, this guy's pretty good. And he had some big name drivers. And as years went by, didn't see Louis' name in the paper anymore, but a mutual friend told me that Louis was back at it. In his 90s, he and his two sons, who are with him here today, they recreated the second version, the second car he had, and they're running in vintage races. Fortunately, they don't let Louis drive around too much, but the boys take the car out. But Louis' cars were good in that day. He's running a little flathead Model A, B block, and in my mind, one of his main claims to fame was his car won the first ever race at the Thompson, Connecticut Speedway on May 26, 1940, with David Dizzy Vance of Boston driving. And they beat some high dollar machines with supposedly better engines. But Louis was a self-taught guy, knew his stuff, and he knew how to make a car go. And he still does. When he traveled down to the mid-Atlantic coast, his fame and his cars were so well known that if he showed up without a driver, there was an absolute waiting list of named drivers, Hank Rogers Sr., men of that ilk that wanted to drive Louis' cars. Lee Waller, who won Indianapolis, took a few rides in Louis' cars and won a race at Flemington, New Jersey, which was no easy place. So Louis today has one of the few race cars that is driven on the street to a car show at Dedham, Mass. every July, because their garage is up maybe a mile. It's kind of semi-street legal, but being such a long-time citizen of Dedham, nobody minds. And Louis and his boys just run up and back to the show and back to the garage. So I'd like to welcome Louis up here, and people, if you get a chance, talk to Louis. This guy is truly a treasure. He's been involved since the mid-30s, far longer than most of us would even care to contemplate, and he's still sharp as a tack. And we welcome Louis into the New England Auto Races Hall of Fame. Come on down, Louis.
Thank you very much.
Over here. Stand right there. Right here.
Completing our list of veterans inductees this year is Blazing Buddy Bardwell. He actually started his career on the highways of New Hampshire before getting into racing. His first race came in 1949 in Brattleboro, Vermont. The car was a 1934 Ford owned by Pearlie Fielder. In later years, he continued on with the same, actually the car that he ran for so many years, which most people are probably familiar with, was a 1934 Ford adorned with steer horns. That car was actually built in 1955 and most famously powered by a Hudson power plant. Buddy ran that car at dozens and dozens of tracks throughout the Northeast, winning at many of those tracks. A young announcer by the name of Kenley Squire dubbed him Blazing Buddy Bardwell for the name very much fitting for the amount of victories that he won. For the next 7 decades, Buddy Bardwell is won, race tracks throughout New England. Amazing, the past 50 years, Buddy has competed in the same car. It is estimated that he ran at 87 different speedways over his career. Please welcome Blazing Buddy Bardwell into the New England Antique Racers Hall of Fame.
Ladies and gentlemen, Buddy Bardwell is in the house. He's up here and he says, thank you for this honor. The next presentation is the Danny Pardee Award. I would invite Marie Pardee to come to the stage, and to present the award is Hall of Famer Mr. Pete Zanardi.
For some of us, is one of the biggest things we do. I'm here to tell you, see how far this Hall of Fame has come. It wouldn't have happened without Danny Pardee. When Danny passed away, we thought the most fitting tribute to him would have been an award in his name, an award that honors, recognizes service, dedication to NEAR, and to the whole concept of honoring past heroes in our sport. Danny could make us laugh. I'm sure all of you people remember his one-liners and things that were pretty funny. But when it came to business, Danny was all business, a no baloney type guy that got the job done. And we, tell you the truth, we worried a lot who was going to come forward to replace Danny when he stepped down. Well, look around, folks. Somebody stepped forward. Somebody stepped forward to make this thing continue. I'll tell you who stepped forward. Rhonda Blanchette stepped forward. She is the treasurer. She is pretty much a consultant in all things that when we kind of get mixed up, it's poor Rhonda that, not poor Rhonda, Rhonda that kind of straightens us out. Rhonda, congratulations. You are the 2011 Danny Pardee Award winner.
I don't know what to say. Thank you. It's a lot of work, but I enjoy doing it, and everybody makes it easy. So thank you.
Once again, serving as our MC for the second half of our program is the voice of the Thompson Speedway, Stafford Speedway, and the Waterford Speed Bowl. Ladies and gentlemen, our MC for today, Mr. Matt Buckler.
Thank you, Pete, and good afternoon, everybody, as we are ready for the greatest day in the winter, and that's at the NEAR Banquet. We have such a great crowd tonight. We're going to start by taking attendance. So by your applause and enthusiasm, let's check out the house today. How many people are here from Connecticut? How about Massachusetts? Do we have any people from the Bay State? Rhode Island, do we have you in the house? Yes, we do. What about in Vermont? Well, they know how to whistle there. I know they're not whistling at me. What about New Hampshire? Do we have a congregation from there? And what about the people who made the longest haul? They came from Maine. Do we have any Maine people here? Enthusiastic as usual. And there's one more area that we have to consider. How many people came from Florida? Well, we're happy to have everybody here. You know, there's one common, actually there are two common bonds that hold people in New England together. We all love auto racing, and we all hate snow. But we're going to make a promise today. We're not going to talk about low pressure areas, wind chill factors, bombogenesis. It sounds like something that Skip Matsack put in his race car. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about clippers. We're not going to talk about storm warnings. If it doesn't go in a race car today, we are not going to talk about it. So that is a promise we are making. Now, how many people are here for the first time at a NEAR dinner? How many people have the yellow stripes on the back of their chairs? Okay, let me tell you what you're in for. You're going to meet some incredible people with some incredible stories to tell. And they get more incredible as the bar gets more business. So get ready for some action. You'll hear stories that were in the newspapers, but the best stories are the ones that never made the papers. You're going to hear about them today at the New England Racing Hall of Fame. So let's get it started. Wave the green flag. Our first presenter is a man who did a great job. The first race I ever covered, he was announcing the race at Stafford Motor Speedway, the Spring Sizzler for the Motor Racing Network. but that's only one piece of his career. He's also raced at many announced at many racetracks in the Northeast, most notably at Monadnock Speedway, where he is considered a longtime voice. Started there in 1971. How about a hand for Dave Sutherland?
Well, good afternoon. Nice to be here. This is my first time, I hope not my last. We are getting older. I was thinking on the way down that there's no football to watch, there's no racing to watch, there's no snow to shovel. So if it weren't for this banquet, today could probably be the most boring Sunday in January. I was really quite pleased that Punky Karen asked to have me come and tell some stories about him. Well, that about covers it. Actually, I could probably detail a very storied career, particularly at Monadnock and Claremont, the number of races he's won, the number of championships he's won. And I recall that there were a number of drivers who used to talk to in the pits who were very concerned when they came to Monadnock because Punky was the police chief in Goshen, New Hampshire. And they felt that if they violated him on the racetrack, if they ever went through Goshen, he would, seek reprisals. Please understand something. First of all, during those days, Punky was a logger, which meant he worked from sunrise to sunset, so you could go through town unscathed. Second of all, the population of Goshen, New Hampshire is 741. If there was crime, it was occasional speeder, a DWI, or some kids squealing their tires on the main highway. Punky was the police chief, which meant that either because he was police chief, there was no crime, or there was no crime because he was police chief. Or you could flip that around if you wanted to. Most of Punky's exploits have been written about in the papers, but there's one race where Punky was a ringer. And this is how it developed. Some of you in the racing world probably know a guy named Brian Hickey. Brian was the chief financial guy at Dover. He worked at Hinsdale Raceway, harness track, and he raced a little bit around our racetracks. He set up a deal in the 70s. He thought it'd be really cool if the top 10 harness drivers at Hinsdale Raceway would race in our 6-cylinder division of Monadnock, and the top 10 Monadnock drivers would go over and race sulkies at Hinsdale, which was a better deal for us because they had a great dining room and we got free food, and that was really cool. And as you know, when we race on the racetrack, you line them up 2 by 2. When you race harness racing, which would never work on a racetrack, I line them up across the track with a moving gate, and when they open the gate, they all dive into turn 1. You can imagine what would happen on an oval track. They did it. We had probably 7 or 8 guys that had a little practice. They got on their race. The gate went away, it closed, headed off into the corner, and the first guy into turn 1 was Punky Karen. He was also a half a straightaway ahead of everybody else by the time the rest of them came out of turn 2 and won the race. What they didn't know was in his early years as a logger, they logged with horses. So racing a sulky was a ringer for him because it was 1 horse, not 2, a regular horse, not workhorses, and there was no log on the back. That's the one win probably out of the probably close to 200 that he has kept quiet. Chief among his accomplishments, in addition to wins at many tracks around New England, in one span he won championships at both Claremont and Monadnock in the same year. Monadnock, 75 wins, 74 wins. At Claremont, that many, if not more, plus several wins at lots of other racetracks. The most fun, I think, I had watching him race was against Ollie Silver. Some classic battles. A lot of people felt that when Punky was behind them, it was not good, that when they spun out, it was his fault. I can tell you from sitting up in the tower, there was always this much daylight between his front bumper and their back bumper. However, I'm sure that if you took a tire temperature of the right rear tire of the guy in front of Punky, it was way out of whack. And he may have aided them in exiting the lead position, but he never really helped him, did he? The only time I ever saw complete full-body contact was the one time he launched the 121 over the back of Ollie Silva's car going into turn 3. Ollie had to stop short for something, and Punky was on the gas and went right over the top of his car. That was probably the most spectacular ride I've seen him take. Next to one he probably took driving up here from Virginia for this event today. Without going into a whole lot more detail, it's my extreme honor to introduce to you one of my favorite drivers of all time and one of the guys that I've always enjoyed watching racing. Would you please welcome to the Near Hall of Fame, Howard. His mom calls him Howard. We call him Punky Karen.
Well, I'd like to thank the near inductees before me to give me this chance of being here today. I didn't think it'd be this big, this magnitude. I'm really proud to be here and hope that I can make several trips after this to enjoy more chats like I had today with the people I hadn't seen in a while. I don't have a long speech, but in my career, our stint with the 121, I'd like to thank a couple of guys, Glenn and Kurt Werkler, that owned the 121, mechanicked it. They actually slept with it. But this car was capable of winning no matter who drove it. This car was 110% every race that I ever went to. I enjoyed driving for him. We had a good relationship. It was fun. And after we honed our skills a little bit, we became competitors that we didn't think we were going to be. But we became competitors because of their devotion to make sure that that car was 110. And I appreciate that very much, Kurt and Glenn. You're the reason why I'm standing here today. And hopefully I'll be sitting down watching you here someday also. Second, I'd like to thank another crew that I drove for in my latter part, the number 11, which was owned by Ed Pelletier and wrenched by Doug Falzer Reynolds, which is a 4-year stint that I drove their car. The same thing as the Worklers. The owner was just fabulous as far as the right car, a good car, and Doug Falzer Reynolds, the same as the Workler boys, just 110% mechanically. And had 4 good years with them and 3 championships. So I also want to thank them for me being standing here also. Good cars, wins, that's why I'm here. Last, I'd like to thank my wife that put up with me for 47 years, and it was race, 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 race. Never complained. Never complained, and always made sure that our 4 boys were ready to go on time. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, darling. Also, highlight my career was, as our sons got older, they thought, well, gee, show Dad we're just as good as he is. So they got their little stint into racing. The street stocks, as up as they went, and proved to Dad that they were just as capable as Dad was, turning a wheel and winning races. They gave their mother and I a lot of good times watching them. Not in it that long, but the length of time that they spent in it, they proved to Dad that they were a threat, so you better not stay where you are long. So thank you very much for the induction, and I hope that I see everybody here next year. And thank you, Dave.
Punky Karen, officially in the New England Racing Hall of Fame. I just learned something. There are 2 things that I regret. That I wasn't there that day to watch Punky Karen race in a harness race. And the second thing I regret, I wasn't there to bet on him, because I bet that was the biggest guaranteed winner of all time. Our next presenter has so many hats, it's hard to list them all in a few seconds. He's been a driver. He has been a writer. He has been a promoter. He has been an editor. He's one of the best publishers in New England because of Coastal 181. He keeps all the stories of New England racing alive. But maybe his number one thing, he is a great storyteller, and he is about to prove it again tonight. Lou Boyd.
Hi, everybody. I think I'd like to, if I could, just divert from the program for just a sec to give you a little bit of news about something in near. And I was thinking about this coming down. You know, it's been a hard year for everybody since we met last. And one of the things that I think culminated it for everybody was how tiresome that election got last fall. I really don't care whether your side was John Boehner or Barney Frank, but I think we can take it to the bank that all of those people were just spinning their wheels and playing to the grandstand as opposed to worrying about what they should be, which is driving this country out of trouble. Well, as I said, there is some good news. You might remember that one of the things that we did last year at this banquet was to bring Marty Hardy into the Hall of Fame. And Marty is a really good guy. He's one of you noisy people from New Hampshire. He's 91 years old, and Marty thought, I've had enough. And Marty ran for state representative in New Hampshire as a Republican, and damn it, he won. So, Marty, will you please start up there in New Hampshire and get this straightened out for all of us? And now, back to the program, and back to this issue of Jerry Dolliver. You know, there was an aspect to Jerry Dolliver that's just plain storybook. And let me explain that a little bit. You know how it is that a lot of the old-time drivers that we've recognized over the years were just a little bit standoffish? You know what I mean, the engineer boots of Pete Corey, remember them? And how about Judd Larson? Remember how he'd roll the cigarettes up in the sleeve of his t-shirt? Or even Don Moon when he put that extra little doo-wop wave in his hair. Well, up there in the sleepy little town of Kingston, New Hampshire, it was really, really different. Jerry Dolliver was totally accessible. He was the prince of the village. He was everybody's buddy, completely down to earth. He has a good friend named Skip Armstrong who was with him for years, and Skip is here today. And Skip would say of Jerry, wicked good guy. He'd just do anything for anybody, particularly older people. And I just don't understand quite how he made a dime doing it. But he did, and he got by. He got by for a whole generation, his Sunoco station being the civic center of Kingston, New Hampshire, and certainly the gathering point. Well, there was another aspect to Jerry as well, and that was he was a race car driver, and he was world-class caliber. It started in the 40s in hulking sedans and the ice races, and he got really good. So he morphed over to Pine Speedway, where he was 8-time track champion in the cut-downs, often driving that Merrimack Brothers cut-down out of the Merrick Brothers out of the Merrimack Valley. And he won the AARN championship in 1955 for overall in New England. He then, quite remarkably, had one engine built by Bill Welch, which is now in the Pro 9 Museum that Rick Mariscal and R.A. Sylvia have. And with that little flathead motor alone, he won over 100 feature events. That has to be a national record of some kind. And Jerry just kept on going. Supers, sprint cars, modifieds, hill climb cars at Belknap's, snowmobiles, whatever you want, he raced it. And he raced them well. It was storybook. But you know something? Remember the words of Steve McQueen, how he used to croon with that string band of his, how into every life a little rain must fall? Well, Jerry was no exception. One of the really, really tough moments was the day that he went to cut the lid off a 55-gallon drum that he just bought and was told was clean, and it exploded. And he suffered horrific injuries being hurled across his garage. And then Jerry had two sons, Brian and Peter. Now, Peter was absolutely a wonderful guy by anybody's measure, but he was sick. He had diabetes right from the start, and this was a situation that just went downhill. It was very sad, and Peter would later die with a pancreatic transplant that didn't quite work out. And Jerry, he had some problems of his own. He always looked so energetic, and he was taut, fit as a fiddle. The truth is, he was born with a congenitally small heart valve. They tried to fix it at Hitchcock Medical Center in the 60s, but it didn't really work. And he always suffered from exhaustion, and he was tired so easily. It was a real chore for him. But how he loved to race, and he just kept going. Then finally, in 1991, that old ticker was getting ready to give out. Jerry was really looking forward to a tour with Nema Midgets, and he was in a car built by Skip Armstrong, and he was warming up at Star in August of '91, and he pulled off the track, came into the pits, went over as he often did, sat on the rail of the trailer, had a cup of water, and keeled over. Gentleman, Jerry died. Well, you know, whatever your spiritual orientation may be, I don't think that any of you can disagree with me that one way or another, Jerry Dolliver is with us today, right in this hall. Right over there, most certainly his son Brian is. Brian is a very well-known name in northern New England racing circles. Brian's run 350 Supers, sprint cars, modifieds. He's run Bear Ridge, Canaan, Big Daddies, Lee, Beach Ridge, and won. If you've ever watched Brian drive, you would see that calm, consistent style that so characterized his dad. And sitting right next to Brian is Jerry's grandson, Max Dolliver. Max Dolliver is just 10, but he started last year at Route 106 Raceway and at Twin Cities Speedway in his karts. And you know what? Right to the podium finishes, folks. This kid's gonna be hot. I think one of the most delightful things about this sport that we have is that it develops such amazingly rich family racing legacies. So it's altogether appropriate that we now ask Brian and Max to come up here and help their father step in to the New England Hall of Racing Fame in perpetuity.
I want to thank everyone for voting my dad in. He'd really appreciate it, and thank you.
Weather update. We said we wouldn't talk about today. July of 1975. 80 degrees in Monadnock, where Punky Karen is getting ready to win another feature. It's 70s on the Cape, where Dan Meservey is getting ready to put his Mini Modified to work. And it's 34 degrees at Plainville Stadium. That's not the weather, that's the temperature of the beer that's in the pit area after the races. Now our next topic is Plainville Stadium, and the man to make the next, or one of the topics, and the man to make the presentation, once again, has just done about everything there is to do, not only in auto racing, but in sports broadcasting. He owned Stafford Speedway. He was the #1 pit reporter on ABC and ESPN for many years. Great on the college football sidelines. He is currently the voice of the Wheeling Modified Tour on Versus, as well as the voice of their IRL coverage. And how did he get his start? Well, not too many people know this. He actually started at Plainville Stadium selling ice cream. But because he liked the races so much, Plainville Stadium was noted for two things: great hot dogs and melted ice cream. Here is Jack Arute.
I am humbled to speak on behalf of two men that account for over 200 victories in the world of modified racing, that have had Hall of Fame drivers wheel their cars. Just today, listening to drivers saying, gee, I want to go over Ray and Rich here. But if you want to know about these Hall of Famers and their accomplishments, pick up the program. Because instead, I would ask all of your indulgences. I'd like to tell you a story. A story about a little fat kid that lived on South Main Street in New Britain, Connecticut, and really could never understand what it was that his father did. You see, we lived abutting a construction industry, and while all of my friends at North End Elementary School were playing with Tonka toys, I was out back with ukes and loaders, and they were a lot bigger than me. My father was always gone, and it was always the yelling from my mother of, wait till your father gets home, that struck fear into me. But then when my father would get home on a Friday night, he would mete out the punishments for the week, and then come Saturday morning, he was off and away. And it was this thing that he called racing. And as a very young child, I was smart enough, or some people think stupid enough, that the way to win my father's heart was to become a fan of auto racing. Little did I know that that was God's hand at work. Not because of the relationship that I enjoyed with my father, but because as a young child I learned things that I take, and I hope I will take to my grave. As dysfunctional as my family might have been, God looked after me and gave me family. It was just a bike ride over Route 72, a little cinder block building with a couple of gas pumps out front that I never really saw anybody pumping gas, called Ray's Garage. And as a very young child, I was absorbed into the Garuti family. Not at the expense of my own family, but out of the heartfelt love that they had for a young boy that wanted to learn how to love their dad, his own dad. There are so many memories that I have of being corrected, of being a little amped up and having Ray say, that's bull crap, Jesus Christ, Jackie. And on the other side, Richie, just smiling and pretty happy to have me around. And when you're a young boy and you're really just starting to develop what are supposed to be the cornerstones to your life, to be blessed to have two individuals that instilled in me what the true meaning of integrity was, what the true meaning of honesty was, and most importantly, what the true meaning of family was. Yeah, I sold ice cream at the Plainville Stadium because my father wouldn't take me to the races. But at the cajoling of Ray and Rich, when it was time for the Riverside 500, he'd begrudgingly take me. Or Richie may take my dad aside and say, why don't you bring Jackie with us tonight? I never got to tell you guys that story. That deep down in my heart, I knew if it was at the beach, when stupid me threw the anchor into the rowboat and busted the bottom out of it. And again, Raymond would come up and say, Jesus Christ, Jackie, what are you doing? I was blessed with 3 fathers, 3 families. I thought I had the best gig in the world. And then along came an opportunity for my dad to own something called the Stafford Motor Speedway. And my father made a decision that put that family in jeopardy. And because of those principles of integrity, because of those principles of honesty, my family was put asunder and split. One group maintained the integrity that They wanted to go in one direction. The other member of the family went in the opposite direction. And I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me in any way, shape, or form, because having been instilled with integrity and honesty and in the beliefs that were given to me by my three fathers, there was also one critical element: respect disagreements. But the only regret that I always had is I lost my family. And I'm going to speak on behalf of what I think my father would say today as they join him in the Hall of Fame. First of all, they should have been before him, because they taught him the same principles that they taught me. And Ray and Rich, I truly do believe that he would say he was sorry, and that if he had it to do over again, Stafford Speedway be damned. We were family, and we need to be family and continue to love and be that family that the Garuti Brothers logo always stood for. I am humbled, and I apologize for the emotions, but I am proud to welcome my two other fathers into the 2011 Near Hall of Fame, Ray and Rich Garuti.
All right, I'm an announcer. I can do this. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody, and I want to thank all the people who's been affiliated with my brother and I for the last 25 years with these cars, and the pleasure of being here. And I want to thank you all very much. Thank you.
Our next presenter is one of the great drivers in New England racing history. He won a lot of big races in his career here in New England, but he just didn't stop there. In 1988, he was, I'm going to call it the Winston Cup because that's what it was there at the time, and this is a Hall of Fame banquet. He was a 1988 Winston Cup Rookie of the Year. And every now and then, he still gets in his race car, and even though it might not be the quickest car in the lot, he still is competitive in it. Also runs a driving school where he teaches the next generation what to do inside the race car, something he knows very well. Ken Bouchard.
Well, I'd just like to thank Jackie for that tough announcement that the follow that he did. We went from the pro to the rookie. So I'd just like to say that Vic Kangas and his wife Sandy and their three daughters, I've known them since I've been like 9 to 10 years old. And the first thing I'd like to say is March 4th is going to be their 50th anniversary, so I'd like to congratulate them on that. Any time when I was young I could get a ride to Vic's shop, I'd go over there and sit there and watch him build cars and fix cars. I learned so much from watching him do it. He was a man, he was a hands-on type guy. He built everything himself, had his own machine shop. There wasn't nothing that he couldn't fix. He knew a lot of things and made it hard for a lot of people in racing because when he showed up with a car, you knew it was going to be fast. He owned some cars in his career and early in his years. He owned a orange little coupe Zero that the late Tinker Projan drove to a track championship in 1965 at Hudson Speedway. They were a tough duel anywhere they went. They were definitely there to win. Vic also helped in his early days in his career to build Ernie Gahan's 1966 NASCAR championship car. Good friends with Ernie and them, and he did a lot for them. Vic's God, this is tough to follow, Jackie. and Bones Bushy had told me I only got 3 minutes to say all his stuff. It would take 2 days to do all the stuff that he has done and won. He also did a lot for my brother in his early career when they built that Camaro that went to Seekonk and won 4-track championships in a row. I believe that was 66 to 69. That was definitely a fast race car, and I'm sure Georgie Summers could vouch for that. Vic also helped Ronnie when he started moving up to run some NASCAR races for the late Dick Armstrong. Vic went with him to quite a few big shows, and they had a lot of good finishes with Dick Armstrong's car. He also, in 1975, crew chiefs my car to the Yankee All-Star League Championship, which is actually one of my favorite ones, Vic. I'd like to thank you. We had a good time. Beating the likes of Richie Evans and them guys is always hard to do, and we did a good job. Vic also then moved towards the south when Ronnie went down there to run for Jack Beebe and helped out Jack Beebe's team, and I believe it was 90-something, and helped them get their team going for a lot of good Winston Cup finishes. He also went on to help Billy Dingman start his Winston Cup team with Greg Sachs behind the steering wheel, with a lot of good shows. Also at Billy Dingman's, he also ran his road race team, which won the 12 Hours of Sebring and the Rolex 24 at Daytona, which is a big accomplishment. Vic also helped some younger drivers get going and start their career, like the late Rob Moroso, Kenny Wallace, Jeff Fuller, when they all went down south to try to run a Bush South car. Vic was there, helped them all along. And working with Vic, you know, you always learned a lot, because he just didn't set the car up. He always, if you had any questions, he always told you what he did, what made the difference, how it worked, which made everybody that he worked here with a much better driver, such as like Pete Van Darker. He's helped him with his career driving and building cars. He's helped Georgie, I know. He's probably helped just about everybody in here one time or another. That was one thing about Vic Kangas. If you needed to know something, he was usually only just a phone call away, and no matter what he was doing or who he was working with, he would always try to help you. He was a great guy, and at this time, I'd like to just say I just would like to congratulate Vic into the Near Hall of Fame, and tell him thanks for everything he's done for me, and he's definitely a friend in his family for my whole lifetime in racing. I looked up to him, and I'm just glad to know him, and thank him for all the stuff that I learned from him. Thank you, Vic.
I guess I got a lot of people to thank. Nobody does anything like this on their own, and certainly I didn't either. I mean, I've got a family reunion going on here tonight, which is pretty good, and also I want to thank the Near Hall of Fame for inducting me. This is a pretty big honor. I've worked with a lot of the people in this room, including Kenny and Ronnie, George Summers, Pete Van Darker, and if I don't say your name, that doesn't mean I don't appreciate you coming. But I don't know what else to say. I was supposed to have some funny stuff to say, but the funniest thing I can say is thank you.
Okay, how do you like the party so far? We still have a lot of great stories to tell. And here's a man who has told stories for his entire career. I think one of the best in the business. You know, we have a lot of writers in this room, but there's only one who captures the sport of auto racing as well as Bones Boussier does. He is currently the senior writer of Speedway Illustrated, but he's worked for a lot of publications, and he's written a lot of great books for Coastal 181. People you know by their first name, like Bugsy and Eddie and Tony. And his books just keep on getting better, and he is the greatest storyteller. It doesn't matter if the guy is famous or he's just a weekly racer. Nobody tells his story better than Bones Boussier.
Thank you, Matt. I'm glad I didn't have to follow Jackie. Kenny's tough enough as it is. But, there are a few people in this room whose lives in racing have not been touched by our next inductee. At the dawn of the 1970s, Val LeSueur launched a weekly trade paper which became absolutely the last word on racing in this region. Known in its first few years as New England Speedway Scene, and later simply as Speedway Scene, it was a motorsports Bible in the days before internet sites, message boards, and cell phones provided all of us with instant news and results. Speedway Scene was a newspaper with a bit of an attitude. 150 years ago, in 1861, Wilbur Story, who was the editor of the Chicago Times, famously said, "It is a newspaper's duty to print the news and raise hell," unquote. Speedway Scene certainly did all that, which was a direct reflection of the man at the top. Mixing results and colorful columns, Val's paper was required reading for so many constituencies. Fans used it as a guide in planning their weekends. Promoters alternately loved and hated its candid commentary. Racers valued the boost it gave their careers. One driver said being on Speedway Scene's front page in those days reminded him of that old song on the cover of the Rolling Stone. Additionally, Speedway Scene provided a forum for some of New England's best-known writers, including Pete Zanardi, Dick Berggren, Phil Smith, Dave Sutherland, Dave Shippey, Lou Modestino, Tootie Gelinas, Dave Moody, Mark Thomas, Craig Korlacki, Charlie Flanders, Joe LaRochelle, and the list goes on, people we all know. Those of you who know Val will understand when I say he was never exactly warm and fuzzy. I ended up working for him in various editorial capacities for something like 9 years. When I started, I was 18 years old, and I had never experienced a job interview quite like that, and I never did again. We were at one racetrack or another, and Val said, in that blunt manner of his, "You coming to work for me or what?" A week later, different track, same question. "You coming to work for me or what?" The next week, he called me on the phone and said, "What's the story? Do you want that bleeping job or not?" I was just a kid, like I said, 18 years old, had never lived away from home, and I wanted more information about it. Val said, "Here's the deal. I'm tired of talking about it. Either you start this Monday or you can go screw yourself." I started that Monday. Speedway Scene was very much a family operation. Val's son and daughter, Bobby and Valerie, who are both here today, helped out in any number of capacities, and not a single issue would have ever gotten out the door without the dedication of Val's wife, Ann, who kept the place rolling. It was a fun place to work, but the biggest joy that the paper gave me, and probably all of us, happened to me years earlier. Speedway Scene's earliest days coincided with my early days as a race fan. And to discover at age 12 or 13 that there was a weekly paper that covered automobile racing in our neighborhood was something that seemed almost too good to be true. Here's how important that discovery was for me. Until I saw that newspaper, my racing world began and ended at Plainville Stadium, which was 7 miles from my home. But what I saw in Speedway Scene made me absolutely burn with the desire to also visit other tracks. Whether it was an action photo of Ali Silva at Monadnock, a victory lane shot of a guy kissing a cow after the Milk Bowl at Thunder Road, a Riverside Park commentary from Tootie, or a NASCAR North race report from Catamount, everything in Val's paper made me want to get out and see those places. I can only imagine how many other kids made their first trips to Stafford, or Westboro, Beach Ridge, Star Speedway, Seekonk, and so many other tracks simply because they'd had their curiosity piqued by something they read in Speedway Scene. Val's paper was where we got the before and after scoop about all the great races of that era. The Thompson 300, the Can-Am Classic, the Blastoff 100, the Spring Sizzler, the old Christopher Columbus 200, the Oxford 250, on and on. And it was with the help of Speedway Scene that so many nicknames became household names. We call Pete Fiandaca the Traveling Man to this day because we read it in the paper. Same with Joey the Kid Carafas, Racing Ralph Nason, Daring Dick Casso, Robbie Crouch, the Tampa Tornado, Leo the Lion Cleary, Gramps Greco. And it was in the pages of Speedway Scene that I first heard of a guy called Punky Karen. Speedway Scene introduced a lot of us directly to our heroes and indirectly to so many of our friends. There are certainly people in this room who never would have met if we hadn't been motivated by that paper to get out and visit new racetracks. And when you think about it, that's a pretty wonderful legacy. Val has done a lot of other interesting things, including founding the popular Race-A-Rama trade show that ran for so many years at the Eastern States Exposition in West Springfield. But his crowning achievement, no question, was his newspaper. In a time in which short track racing was absolutely booming, when fans and teams took to the road like never before, jumping in and out of different racing neighborhoods with a real zest for the game, a zest for life itself, Speedway Scene was a key ingredient. It was a roadmap for how to go racing and how to have fun doing it. It printed the news and it raised hell. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend Val Lasser into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame.
You're a goddamn beaut. He talks about his thing being cut. You just cut the hell out of mine. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all the inductees, tonight's inductees, and all of the Hall of Famers that are here. I'd like to thank the NER for putting me in this great fraternity. I've worked on this Hall of Fame for years, and I never dreamed that I'd ever be in it. You know, first of all, I'm going to dedicate this to my deceased wife, who worked 24/10. To my two kids, Valerie and Bob. It's been one hell of a journey. Before I got this guy that lived at my house, and that's where he lived for 9 years, if you worked for me, you had to live there for at least 3 days of the week. We had this guy that everyone here knows, George Pendergast. He worked for me too. Man, we had some times. One would go for 5 days at a time. We'd have about $15 to $20 between us. We'd go all up New Hampshire, through the mountains to New York. Cost us $3 in a motel up in Malta. We'd get the free meals. You know how George always did stuff with STP? We'd stop for gas. He'd give the guy a picture of Richard Petty and say that he was the head crew chief, and the guy he'd give us the free gas. Unbelievable. We went with Dan Meserve's flying circus all over New England. We had this, one of the drivers, Jerry Capozzoli, he'd borrow a school bus from a neighborhood. The whole family would be in the school bus. We'd go for the weekend. Yeah, we went up to by Monadnock, and we stayed up where Punky lives. Little store. We never see Punky. He's supposed to be the goddamn police chief, and he's off logging somewhere. Unbelievable. I don't even think 700 people lived in that town. You know, I could go on all night. They told me that I had extra time because them guys don't want to speak. But, you know, it's been one hell of a journey. I had about 20 pages, but we'll just skip them. I'd like to, mention, we had a lot of guys that spent a lot of time on Speedway Scene because that's who they were. Speedway Scene was all the people that were in it, all the fans, all the race drivers, the car owners. That's what Speedway Scene was about, was the real people. You know, people that passed away that did a lot of work with Speedway Scene was Pendergast, Gene Ribello, Bob Echo, Sonny Richards, Fireball Joe LaRochelle, Brother Pat Evans, Todd Drew, Vinnie Hilliard, Jim Crabtree, Phil Harris, Bob Hunter, Bill Henry, and Jack Flowers. There might have been a few others because I think about everyone in New England worked for me. The guys that did all the work for me and made me famous, of course, was Bones. I used to tell everyone down south, Bones Boucher, best writer in the whole country. Who in the hell is he? Who's Bones Boucher? I says, you'll find out. Bones goes down and he enters into their writers' deals down there. He wins 3 Rolex watches. They know who the hell Bones Boucher is now. Just about all of my guys, I'm pretty proud of a lot of the guys that worked for me that went on, did bigger and better things. You know, we had Mark Thomas, who now does a little paper out of up in Maine. He's doing a pretty good job. Howie and Mary Hodge, Bob Morris from up in Maine, Lou Modestino, Tutti Gelinas Rosati, Danny Ayotte, Bruce Boucher, Rennie Dugas, Mike Kalanoff, Peter Zanardi, Dave Moody, Dick Bergeron. You know, I got another 10 pages. Craze Kalaki, Penny Arcady, Mike Joy, Mark Markovic, Gary Grimm, Ray Schuff, Clayton Murphy, Ron Miller, Grace Ryan, John Brower, Dave Shippey, Carl Merrill, Buffy, Ernie Baker, Larry Nisowich, and Christ, I could just keep on going on. They all worked for me at one time or other. And I think I'll cut it short, but I'd like to, everyone get their book there. Take a picture, a look at in there, in your booklet. There's an ad from Prunine Museum. It's in Pawtucket, and you ought to just try to figure some time to get down there and look at it, because you'll be really amazed to know what in the hell we really do have going for me that this guy Rick Marichal and R.A. Sylvia does. And God bless America.
Now, our next presenter, there's an old cliche in motorsports. A driver never retires. he just waits for one more ride to come along. And that was true this year because at the age of 71, Denny Zimmerman competed in a Skip Matzak-owned car at Whip City Speedway. Just one more chapter to a great career, one of the Eastern Bandits who terrorized the East Coast, winning races, putting this area on the map. And he also has a distinction. He raced in a soapbox derby, which is maybe the most unsophisticated car there is. And he raced at the Indianapolis 500 in an Indy car, which might be one of the most sophisticated cars there is. And they had one thing in common. He got them all up to speed. Denny Zimmerman, also a member of the New England Hall of Fame.
This is a special day for me. I get to welcome, can you hear that? Can you hear that squeal? No. Must be my head. My hearing aid. My hearing aids were interfering with the mic. I was getting a squeal. I fixed it. I turned them off. It's tough to get old. First I lost my hair. Then I had to get glasses. And now I've got hearing aids. Golly, what's next? Reminds me of this fellow who was sure his wife was going deaf. She was in the kitchen slaving over the stove making supper. He walks into the kitchen and standing behind her, maybe 30 feet behind her. He says, "What's for supper?" No answer. So he moves a little closer. Now he's 20 feet behind her. "What's for supper?" Still no answer. So he walks a little closer, and now he's 10 feet behind her, and he says, "What's for supper?" And she turns around with her hands on her hips and a really irritated look on her face. She says, for the third time, "Meatloaf." So I'll start over again. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all the inductees this year. And now it's a happy day, a special day for me. I have the privilege of introducing my friend Skip Matzak. His list of accomplishments is impressive, but we're going to just talk about racing credits. He has fielded cars, midgets, sprint cars, Silver Crown cars, and super modifieds. He's won 3 championships at Oswego, New York, in a super modified. Oswego, folks. Oswego was like the World Series of supers. And he did it in cars that he and Mike Hamilton built from the ground up. Chassis and motors and everything. Mike has worked with Skip for a long time, maybe 45 years or so. They are both soft-spoken and both just a little bit deaf. Because of that, they work really great together. Skip plays the piano and a lot of other musical instruments. His company Seals It makes products such as seals and grommets used by NASCAR and many others in the motorsports industry. I think he once told me that every cup car uses at least one of his products. When speaking of folks that have driven for Skip, it's like the who's who of auto racing. There's about 70 that he remembered, just to name a few. Gene Bergen, Buddy Krebs, they each drove that car that's on display out there, that sprint car, for Skip. There's Richie Evans, Fats Caruso, Bentley Warren, Hank Stevens, Jimmy Martell. He's the one that restored that car that's out there. Billy Schultz, Johnny Coy, and here's one, Dick Bergeron. And the list continues. Greg Weld, P.J. Jones, J.J. Yaley, Johnny Heidenreich, Jeff Horn, Jimmy McGuire, Sammy Swindell, Brett Hearn, and of course this past year, Joe Kralik won the Quad 4 Midget Championship at Whip City in Skip's car. The list of tracks that Skip has fielded cars at is lengthy. 84 that he counted, from coast to coast and from Florida to Canada. I won't read them all, but here's a few. Stafford, Thompson, Malta, Fonda, Seekonk, Whip City, Lee Speedway, Star Speedway, Monadnock, Claremont, Beach Ridge, Oxford Plains, Westboro, Williams Grove, Flemington, Lebanon Valley, Reading, Terre Haute, Indiana, Winchester, Indiana, Eldora, Ohio, New Bremen, Ohio, IRP, Raceway Park, the Indiana State Fairgrounds, DuQuoin and Springfield, Illinois, Manzanita and Phoenix, and Sacramento. And that's just a few. He's also the originator of the Thursday night supper. He's the perfect role model or ambassador for the sport of auto racing. Derived from his many accomplishments, one of the things he enjoys is what he calls giving back. I guess you could call it pay it forward. He will show up at a school or community college, sometimes with a race car in tow, and explain the importance of math and science and English, and just how the importance of these subjects can relate to race cars. Oh yeah. I've known Skip for probably 45 years or so, and just this past year, he finally let me drive one of his race cars. I'm honored to welcome him, and NEAR is proud to have him in their Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend Skip Matzak.
Of course, anybody who stands at this podium is truly humbled by being picked by their peers and their friends to participate in what is the greatest sport that could be. Racing is the best thing that ever happened to me. I come from a golfing family. I was playing the accordion in a polka band. I was probably 17 years old in New Britain. I shouldn't have been there. It was a rough, tough bar, and some of the older women, they had to be 21 or 22. Oh my golly. I saw a midget early in my time, and I was taken back. My dad owned a machine shop, and I saw the aluminum brakes, the fine finishes, the way the panels fit, and I was really taken to it. But we started going up to Riverside and watching the cars. We enjoyed it. Sam Pearl, uncle of Jerry Pearl, great uncle of Jeff Pearl, had a car with Danny DeVoe. We got involved a little bit. Because my dad had a machine shop, I could machine parts. In fact, I was serving an apprenticeship that I was able to weld aluminum. And the rear ends at the time were pretty fragile, and I had a little business going of fixing, repairing, welding, remachining rear ends. And here comes Buddy Krebs, my hero, into the shop one day asking me to help. And the car he's asking me to help with is the red Crown 7 that's sitting outside that lovingly was just restored by Jim Martell. When I saw that car, love at first sight. I'm a Chrysler Products guy. It's got a Dodge Hemi. Oh my golly. Gene Bergen drove the car to Wynn's just as it's sitting out there. That's the original paint job. All the equipment is the same. Jimmy refreshed it. Imagine racing against coupes, bombers, late models, modifieds, cut downs with that car, no cage, no roll bar, seat belts that are about 2 inches wide, World War II vintage. Quite a deal. And I understand Gene is having a tough time, so in your prayers tonight, do please say a little for him. I was going to start out with saying greetings. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, fellow inductees, members of NEAR. So I guess that's where we're going. If you look at your program on page 39, there's a picture of that Crown 7 with Jimmy and I, taken by Dick Bergeron, who labeled it Two Old Friends. Couldn't be more correct. Jimmy drove my race car in 1970 or 71, so that makes our relationship about 40 years. His wife, Barbara, really was a good girl when Lois and I went to visit the Polish picnic that she was heading up. And she and her sisters did so much. More on that later. The caption says, "Thanks to my friends along the way." And truly, you are my friends. You are my family. Lois and I didn't have any children. Most of you remember Lois, beautiful girl, loved racing, oh golly. During an interview, she made mention that the race cars were like her children. Well, the announcer said, that can't be true. Hey, look, she said, the labor pains have been phenomenal. That was Lois. My racing career can be summed up in 4 words, and probably it's true for all of you. The 4 words are wonder, blunder, thunder, and plunder. You think about it when you first started. When we started, the wonder part, we didn't know how much air to put in the trailer tires, never mind the race car. Blunder. Well, you work hard enough at it, and you bang your finger enough times, and you make enough mistakes, that finally you start to go a little bit forward. And let me tell you about blunder. Early on, when you put your race car on the trailer, you generally had to pull the right front wheel off because the trailers weren't wide getting past the wheels. Right, Buddha? So I'm going to build a trailer. Got a pair of ramps from a gas station drive-on deal, got some tubing. My first big project, called the state of Connecticut, how wide can I make this trailer? They said 8.5 foot. Well, darn, I'm going to make myself a trailer that I don't have to change anything. We got Buick rims and reversed them, and we went as wide as we could go. And it was a beauty. My 8.5 foot wide trailer. Except the garage door was 8 foot. We tipped it on an angle, took the wheels off, and by a fraction of a fraction, got it out the door. But that was the blunder. So we kept working at it. And finally we got to thunder. We got the package together. We had run a few races, we had a few drivers. Boy, we started to go. The thunder part was terrific. You know, because you can just imagine, you're going down the road and you think you've got a package and you're waiting for that driver to show up. I'll never forget first time Bentley Warren drove for me. Supposed to drive at Oswego for a USAC show, but USAC wouldn't let him run, so he continued to bother me. And so finally I asked him, you ever run a sprinter on dirt? Naturally he lied and said, yeah. So he said, I'll meet you on such and such an airport. I'm going to fly in. He's up in New York and we're coming down from Connecticut. You could tell him with the matching luggage. A brown paper bag with the helmet on one side and another brown paper bag with his uniform in the other. And off we went. Speaking of Bentley, we traveled a lot, went down the road, and Val was talking about the gas and all that. We'd drive through the night, try to find a motel in the morning. We'd walk in like we owned the place until we found somebody leaving. We'd sneak in the room, put a do not disturb sign on the door, and heck, we're good for 3-4 hours of sleep and a shower. I mean, what could be better? And no cost. This was learning how to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. You know, racing, to go a little bit further, racing has really been my formal education. It taught me time management, people management, how to negotiate a deal with a promoter or somebody or a sponsor. Well, all the lessons learned in racing, I've been able to apply to my business. And doggone, it's not bad. Now, in any group, there's always a standout guy. Thanks to my friends along the way. Well, my best friend is Mike Hamilton. Mike is the mechanic that every one of you drivers wish you had on your team. Any driver, when asked, would you like a spare motor or a great mechanic? You're just going to say great mechanic. And that's what Mike is. Now, Mike, if you and Donna would please stand up, because Donna has stood by him in all of our antics. Come on, stand up. We'd be in the victory circle, and Mike would be checking the tires, and I wouldn't be available, and the announcer had to talk to somebody, so he'd walk up to Mike, and he'd hand the microphone. Mike, how did the race go tonight? His script speech was, thank you very much, and he'd walk away. He was not a man of a lot of words, but he certainly did a great job. And Mike, from the bottom of my heart, I hope we get another 35 years together. Blunder, blunder, thunder, and now we come to plunder. That's what I'm doing here today. I'm collecting my reward. When Mike and Donna got married, I was best man. It was a wonderful wedding. We had a great time. It's starting to rain. The party's over. Somebody's got to put the gifts in the food, put it away. Well, I said to Mike as we walked through the rain out to the vehicle to put the stuff away, I said, this is just like racing. We win a race, everybody's hooting and hollering, having a great time, and you and I are loading the car. Nothing's changed. I think I said there were two people that were primarily responsible. One is Mike, and the second is not with us, my late wife, Lois. I lost Lois to cancer 2008. But you remember the story about the kids, and you don't know what it is like to be kids, and the labor pains have been fantastic. Well, Lois truly believed that you are our family. And I want to thank you at this time for never letting her down. There was never a day during her illness that she didn't get a card, a letter, a phone call, something to help her carry on. In fact, as Dennis pointed out, we have product on 100% of all Cup truck and Bush cars. And it was not unusual for me to come home and she'd say, Carl called. Carl? Edwards. He knew she was a fanatic about the Red Sox, and he was with Gillette Everham. Didn't he send every piece of memorabilia he could find to Lois? Or she'd say, Tony called. He told me to get better so he can take me out and really show me a good time. I can imagine what that meant. Ryan Newman is half Polish. As you know, everybody knows we're Polish. My cars always say Polish cannon on the side. And he'd call up and they'd talk about decorating. But none of you ever let her down. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart about how you took care of Lois. As I leave the podium, I know you're going to clap, which is the proper thing to do. But I'm going to ask you one more favor. Please clap loud enough so Lois can hear you. Thank you.
Now, our next presenter, he started out as a racer. He is currently a crew member of a top 10 team at Thompson International Speedway, the Cruisemobile. but he is best known for restoring cars of Hall of Famers. Mike Murphy's Gremlin, Richie Evans Pinto, George Summers Vega, a car for George Savory. They're all Hall of Famers. And if I hit one more snowbank this winter, I'll need him to restore my car. Mark Alden.
Well, most people in New England think of Cape Cod as sandy beaches, golf courses, fried clams. But the New England racing family thinks of Dan Meserve. Dan, I don't know how the hell, for all those years, you've been able to make it off the Cape on Saturday to go racing, because I can't make it off. But I know you've done a great job, and I appreciate you showing up at all the tracks. Dan is a pioneer in the world of racing. He's built cars, he's promoted racetracks, he's driven to championships, he started race clubs, he's done it all. He started off in Chatham, Mass. With the dune buggy races on the sand. I've seen pictures of it with his cars all up and down the road on Sunday. And then he was the last promoter for the Lakeville Speedway. 1975, he tried his hand at the old Lakeville Speedway, and when that didn't work out, Dan went off to the Seekonk Speedway and started the mini modified division along with Anthony Vendetti. And then in the early 80s, Falcone family called him to help him promote the old Westboro Speedway. And Dan was a big driving force in keeping that speedway open for as long as it did. And if Dan didn't probably step up to the plate, we probably wouldn't have got another 5 years like we did. Dan has won races from Florida all the way to Canada, and being president of the Mini Mod Association, which is now the Pro 4 division, he started that, and the Pro 4 Club wouldn't even be here today if it wasn't for Dan. And I'm sure all the people who have enjoyed the Pro 4 racing, Dan, you've done a great job. And he's still at it today. Not unusual to see that 11A Coke machine pull into the racetrack today with Dan still behind the wheel and doing a great job and on finishing in the top 10. And yeah, that's a big accomplishment for you. Dan's been married for 46 years, has 2 sons and a daughter. The 2 boys have also ventured out into racing and had some success. And now Dan is sort of retired, dividing up his time between Florida and beautiful Cape Cod and taking it easy. And you'll see him at the local car shows on Thursday nights down at Sullivan Stadium. And you'll see him at the racetrack anytime, pulling in with that famous 11A. So at this time, I'd like to take the opportunity, Dan, could you please come up and take your astute position in the New England Hall of Fame?
Well, can you hear me all right? I just can't begin to tell you how gratifying this is to be here in front of all the people that for years you looked up to, and all those times that we drove off the Cape and went by the family picnics on Route 6 and saw the people in their backyards having barbecue dinners and stuff, and we were going off to the racetrack somewhere between here and there. And after all these years, it's just great to be here with all you people and all of the people, like I say, our family has looked up to, and we've learned a lot from. I'd like to start off by just introducing some friends and family that are here with me. And I'm going to start off with, I got a little list. It's not quite 20 pages like Val's was, but unfortunately I made it big print. But one of the gentlemen that's with us tonight is Tommy Doan. And Tommy Doan started racing with us in our club back in Chatham back in the late 60s and early 70s, and actually won the first race at Pine Speedway when our club loaded our cars in fish trucks and construction trailers and drove all the way to the Pines and raced with the Aces Car Club. And Tommy Doan won that race. He also went drag racing with me in the mid-60s and we've been close friends for a long, long time. He's with us, along with Peter Sluter, who raced with the Pro Fours and the NEMA Club, started the racing in Chatham when he was a young man. And in 1971, he and I drove all the way to Las Vegas and raced in the Mint 400, and he co-drove the car. We just had one heck of a trip and a great time. I can't believe it was that many years ago, 40 years ago, that we did that, but that's something that we were able to do and have a lot of fun doing. And Peter raced his own modified, a dirt car at Lakeville, a big block. He ran at Reading. He worked on my car as a mechanic. He's a great friend, a great father, and he runs a business. We've been competitors for years in our hometown, and that's Peter Sluter. He's a really good person, and I'm glad he's here with us tonight. Another person, David Nabel, who raced with us, and David currently comes to the racetrack to help me when I go racing the last couple of years. He's tried to make it to most of the shows in Connecticut. People say to me when I go, they say, how come you're by yourself? I said, well, I'm not by myself most of the time. There's three of us, me, myself, and I, the car chief, the crew chief, and the driver. We all get along well, we all communicate well to each other, but one of us is usually a jerk on the way home. But David comes when he can, and Jamie Pena, whose father raced with us, Jamie made my first model when he was 17 years old, a model of my race car, and Jamie was able to come with us today. My wife's cousin, Wynn Crocker, and his wife, Ann, are with us, and our good friends, Bob and Joan Garbarino, who we've been friends with the last 10 or 12 years. And out in the audience is Skip and Ginny Heffernan and Richard Brewstalon. We've all traveled together in our motorhomes the last 12 years and extended our life to a happy time. And they've really been very good friends. Two of our grandchildren, or three of them are here, but the two boys, Brett, Danny's son, who wants to go mini cup racing in the near future, and young Doug, who, when he was 3, and this is what you call being bred into racing, when he was 3, he went to the nursing home and sang to his great-grandmother and the group of ladies at the nursing home the national anthem. And when he was done, he automatically said, "Gentlemen, start your engines." It was just part of life with him. And our oldest grandchild, Brooke, who all the years that I've raced and been many places and taken the trophy a lot, I've never won a race in Connecticut. And my granddaughter is the first one to win a race in Connecticut when she was running the little T when she was 7, I believe. And she's here with us today. She's a really true race fan, and she wants to get back into it someday. Our daughter, Lisa, her husband couldn't make it today, he's sick. She put up with all the deal when we were going racing, the boys and I were going racing. She put up with just being home and helping her mother or doing things. I'm glad that she was able to make it today. She's been a big help. She works in the family business as the boys do. Dan and Doug, who many of you know, who had their racing time and they're getting back into it now that their families have grown a little bit. They're here with us today, and I can tell you that I wouldn't be here today without their help when they were kids, when we traveled out to Winchester, Indiana, or when I raced in Atlanta, that they didn't go with me and help me work on things when the trailer broke on the way down and almost passed us on Route 81. All those times we shared, we'll never forget, and they've been a big help to my racing career. And the biggest help of all is my wife, Sharon, because from day one, she's been a true spirit. She's never discouraged me from racing, and even today, she doesn't discourage me from doing it. A few years ago, I was like running 6th all the time, and I was coming home disgusted. And I said, I either got to sell this car or buy a new engine. She says, well, you better buy a new engine. So it's her fault that I'm still doing it. But she's been a saint, and she is a saint. And I'm very thankful to have her for a wife. And we still got a long way to go. As far as promoters are concerned, I just got to make sure I cover everybody here, because I don't want to forget anybody, and believe me, there's a lot of people, but I can't say them all. Frank Procopio, many of you might know Frank from the midget racing in the days. He was a big supporter of our club when we started back in the 70s. He passed in the 80s. He was a great gentleman. I hope someday that all of you, I guess now I can say all of us, can vote, can help to put his name in this great society, because he was a great person, and any of you who knew him would agree with me. I'm glad to be going in with Bill Balsa, who was a really good friend. He helped our club along the way. He was at Westboro Speedway for a long time when we ran Westboro Speedway. Bill was very helpful in training me how to run 2 sets of books. Is that a private joke, Bill? Oh. And I can only say stay involved. For all you people, young and old, stay involved as much as you can, because it's a great sport, it's full of great people. Pick up somebody young to, when I got involved back in the Pro 4s again a few years ago, I really enjoyed racing with the young guys, and we shared mutual things, mutual respect. And as I would say to you guys, if you go to the racetrack, great. If you don't go to the racetrack, try to find a racetrack to go to and support it, because we are an existing breed that's sometimes hanging on. And all those racetracks need all the help that you can give them. And I'll just say a short thing, that pick up a young friend to help race, because a guided future needs a handshake from the past. Thank you very much.
Our next presenter is the president of the Maine Vintage Race Car Association, but I think everybody knows him for something else. He is the voice of Maine motorsports. He just does a great job, very distinguished delivery, and he knows all the great stories that have made Maine motorsports so great over the years. We are always happy when he can make the trip to Connecticut to join us for the Hall of Fame banquet. Bruce Elder.
Certainly a pleasure to be back once again to participate in one of these history-making events for our sport, and I'm sure you'll all agree what a wonderful day it has been. Well, Russ Nutting got into a race car for the first time in 1957 and won the very first feature he competed in. Not many start that strong, and I'm sure that many at the time felt that it must be a fluke, or at best beginner's luck. Time has certainly proven otherwise. Russ may in fact be the most prolific racer ever out of Maine. He has competed at some 28 different racetracks in the United States and Canada, has won some 200 feature events behind the wheel of everything from a street stock to a super modified. Russ is likely the only driver, at least that I know of, who has competed and won in 6 different decades, and he says he intends to win in his 7th decade. I first saw Russ in 1960 at Beech Ridge driving his number 85 Bomber, where he was a frequent winner. My most vivid memory, however, from the 1960s wasn't a win, but was one of the most spectacular wrecks I'd ever seen. It was 1962, and Russ had come from the rear of the A-class field with his new 111 cut-down, when out of turn 2, he rubbed wheels with another Hall of Famer, Phil Libby, and shot up the dirt embankment that used to line the backstretch, much like the one at Thompson in the old days. Well, it looked like the car had been shot out of a cannon. And when it came down, it struck nose first on the crash guard, vaulted back into the air, cartwheeled the length of the backstretch, coming to rest near the turn 3 pit road exit. I included this as a testament to the builder of that car, who was, of course, Russ Nutting himself. And I'm sure many remember that 111. At that time, it was a cut-down. Today, you see it outside as a coupe. It was known certainly as ahead of its time for fine craftsmanship. And I really wondered back at the time if many of the cars competing could have withstood such a violent crash. Well, Russ is probably one of the most highly respected chassis men in Maine. And because of this ability, he has served as tech director at a variety of tracks, including Beach Ridge, Oxford Plains, Star, and Lee, spanning over 20 years. This level of respect and his wife Darlene's sales ability certainly laid a foundation for R&D racing and fabrication, where Russ has built and rebuilt winning race cars of all types and has completed impressive restoration work. As a driver, Russ has collected a total of 5 championships at 3 different tracks, plus an Open Series championship at Oxford Plains. That may be a little surprising due to the amount of travel in his career. As many will remember, it was Pete Fiandaca who was labeled the Traveling Man. But that certainly would have been a fitting nickname for Russ as well. As mentioned earlier, Russ has competed at some 28 different racetracks. He is one of the drivers highlighted in Lou Boyd's book, Hot Cars and Cool Drivers, for his success at Westboro and the Pines. Russ is one of those drivers, I believe, if he had concentrated on 1 or 2 tracks, probably would have won a multitude of championships. But it was the challenge of running at different tracks against different competition that just seemed to inspire him. I found a clipping indicating where he had run Epping on Saturday night, Seekonk on Sunday, Claremont on Monday, and he had been in Canada and won at Riverglade Speedway the previous weekend in New Brunswick, Canada. There were times that he would leave Beach Ridge on a Saturday night, drive to Lebanon Valley, New York to compete on a Sunday afternoon. So to call Russ Nutting Maine's Traveling Man, I think, would have been appropriate. Well, there's so much more, and of course it's impossible to completely highlight such a long and varied career. I believe one of the highest compliments anyone can receive is to be highly regarded by one's peers. When I asked some people who know Russ very well how they would describe him, this is a bit of what I heard. A great craftsman, a skilled welder, very knowledgeable, stubborn, determined, a real individual, a perfectionist, and a great driver. And this soft-spoken Downeaster is still going strong. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome Russ Nutting forward to accept his induction into the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame.
Thank you, Bruce. You're an extremely hard act to follow. I'm not sure I even did all those things. Anyway, I guess I have to finish the story about the rabbit because I brought it up. I was racing supers at Arundel one night, back in Charlie Elliott days. I was following Dick Batchelor, coming off in 410. Rabbit comes out on a racetrack, hops underneath Batch's right rear. Batch goes sailing in backwards into the one-tail mall. Rabbit didn't do well either. Well, I'd like to thank everyone here for being here. I'd like to thank Nia for making this possible. And one additional thank yous, I think you have to thank everybody from the promoters to the track owners to the track officials to the car owners to everybody. It takes all of us to make this thing work. Special thanks go to a group of my special friends from Maine that brought the race car up that's out in front, which I had no knowledge of. It was some kind of conspiracy, I believe. Also special thanks to my family members that are here, and very special thanks to my wife Darlene that keeps pushing me along. She was hands-on from day one. I already had race cars when we met and were married. So we were married on Saturday morning, went to Star Speedway on Saturday night. Got the car unloaded, got rained out, loaded back up, soaking wet. Went home, changed race cars, got the dirt coupe, went to Lebanon Valley the next day. She drove the car home. Thank you, Darlene. It's not been without its share of adversity, of course. The success I've had, which I've experienced and enjoyed. Went to Canada one time. Randy McLean called and was having a Canadian Classic up there, Canadian USA. He wanted a USA car, didn't have one, so he said, would you please come up? And we'd been there before on the Nesbitt tour. So, okay, we go up. We round up a couple of people to go with us, Jimmy and Sandra Gary. They took a car, we took a car home. So we get up to we got the callus to stop for gas. So we get the gas tank filled up, and I get in the truck and pull the clutch in, started the motor, and the truck goes backwards like a shot. Well, I got it shut off just in time to miss a Corvette that was behind me. So anyway, we crossed the line and got to get underneath the truck and see what the problem was. So Jimmy crawls underneath the truck, feet are sticking out. I'm in next to a package store. This guy comes teetering out. He's been fortifying his old schooners he's been drinking with a bag of new ones. He teeters over by the truck. Oh my God, he said. He thought I'd run over the guy. So we get going up the road, managed to go by shutting the motor off and then cranking it up in gear. So that was all right till we get to St. John. St. John's uphill. This ain't good. We get up there and I'm trying to look ahead to see when the green lights are going to be, and I missed. So we're in the middle of a hill. I got to start the truck, and it didn't want to carry it. So, okay, back around, get into a side street, say, I got a person up here and a person down here. I says, let me know when it's time to go. Okay, so it's time to go. So we get out of St. John, get up to Moncton, we pull the transmission out, fix the clutch. We get on the racetrack, finally get in the feature, run about a third of the way. Well, get a little crash, so been trying to fix the car, the tie rods and stuff. I'm underneath the car, fixing it. This guy comes in here, making a pit stop, backs in, all excited, runs over my foot. Well, he not only ran over my foot, he left the car sitting on it. Well, he was a big guy. I don't know how many coffees he'd had before he started racing, but he sure had hell excited. He made enough of production out of getting out of that car, and boy, that was hurting all the time. So anyway, we get the car off at foot. We're going to run an Oxford show the next day, so we hurry up, get back to Maine, and go to Oxford. So, okay, we load the car. That feature's dead. So we get back to Oxford, start the race, get in the feature, blew the transmission out. This is a fine weekend. I want to thank you all. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. I've looked the list of previous inductees over. It's a pretty impressive list, and I'm very, very honored to have my name part of it. Thank you.
I think there's only one thing left to do. How about one more big hand for the class of 2011 in the New England Racing Hall of Fame. These guys deserved it. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, support the racers of today, but never forget the racers of the past, because they built this sport to what it is today. Good night, everybody, and so long from the Hall of Fame.